Three, two, one. Welcome to the David the Dog Trainer podcast, episode 123.
203.
It's me. We got Josh over here. There's Josh.
Hey. Oh, God. Now I'm going to see myself.
Yeah, right. Josh is going to be asking the questions, and I'm going to be answering them. So let me just make sure I got the IG thing pulled, or the YouTube. All right, let's start with this YouTube one. Okay. So we got YouTube question here from Denmark. Sani, I believe. Apologies if I pronounce that wrong. Sani says, hi from Denmark. Thanks for watching from all the way over there. It's probably where they're ahead of time, so it's probably later in the day there right now. They said, thoughts about an anxious Rottweiler that chooses flight. How do I help it? I proceeded to obviously ask for some clarification on that situation. And she said, it's someone else's dog. He runs away every time he sees a stroller, bicycle, running, and so on. He has never, as far as we know, experienced anything that would make him so scared. Okay, we see this all the time. Dogs that are just scared of stuff, right? And you have, two ways that can kind of present itself. Way number one is obviously they get fearful of something and they want to either react at it, so they have more like of a forward response to kind of make that scary thing go away. Or you have dogs that have the opposite, right? So they have the flight response to it. So fight or flight, right? When dogs are uncomfortable with something, they'll generally resort to one of those two things to make that scary thing go away. So I ironically was just working with a dog yesterday that had virtually these same issues, right? So it's a dog that somebody adopted from a rescue that we did a board and train with, and they're coming in for follow-up sessions now to learn how to handle that dog, right? And this dog is just, for whatever reason, not been very exposed to traffic. They've not been exposed to, a lot of cars, a lot of, bikes, a lot of people, stuff like that. And when they brought him in for the first session, they were having a ton of impulse control issues in general with the dog. So forget the places that the dog was scared of things. This dog was just extremely impulsive just in general, right? So when people would come over the house, impulsively jumping and climbing on them, things out the window, obviously impulsively running to try to see what's going on out there, obviously, and getting reactive towards it, impulsive towards food. If something would fall off of the counter, the dog would be just mindlessly trying to run over and get it. And a lot of times when we have dogs that have this like fear response out in public when they're being impulsive about stuff, we kind of forget about all of those other areas where the dog isn't being fearful. And we forget that this is just a really, really big impulse control problem that the dog has, right? So first thing that we do in these situations is we tackle all of the less emotionally charged impulsive issues that the dog is having, right? So we set up drills where the dog is being patient when things fall on the ground. If there's food bowls coming down, they're not just like mindlessly diving into them. If people come over, they're learning to control those impulses by either holding a bedstay as they're coming in, or at least learning that there's a cutoff as far as when you start getting all wound up, you can't just climb all over people and jump all over them and things like that, right? And we tackle all of those areas, which usually makes then the places that are more emotionally charged when the dog is really nervous about something a little bit easier because the dog's already practiced good impulse control up until that point, right? From there, we hold the dog to an expectation, right? I think a lot of times because the dog's scared of something, we tend to look at it as it's something different. We tend to look at it like, oh my God, they're nervous of that car running by. So like, I can't hold them accountable for holding it down, or I can't hold them accountable for holding a heel position. I have to like change their emotional response to the trigger, right? Which is like twofold, because like we do want to change the emotional response to the trigger, but we change the emotional response to the trigger by teaching the dog to keep themselves under control around it, right? Which then breaks this cycle of I see this thing, I'm scared of this thing, I think something really bad is going to happen, so I just take off, right? Or I react at it, or whatever it may be. And you create again, ding, 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 we've talked about this a couple times now, prediction error, right? So you create a prediction error where, that happens, this thing they usually would do in the presence of it doesn't happen. They control that impulse. And then the thing they predicted was going to happen, the scary thing that they were running away from in the first place, also doesn't happen. So it reassures them, wait, was there actually something to be scared of in the first place, right? So that's kind of the first step of working through these things. And this dog in particular that I was talking about, we did 2 sessions so far. First session was like 2 weeks ago. Second session was literally yesterday. And first session, we worked on, the jumping on people, obviously, because that was a big problem, people coming in the house. What's going on here? Paused because you weren't using the app. Oh. Oh, I guess I have to. This must be a new feature on Instagram Live where you have to like use the app or else it'll pause the live. That's really weird. Whatever. Anyways.
Yeah, you're still going. So
first session, again, we worked on the jumping, the impulsiveness there, and we worked on tightening up leash walking. And the leash walking was messy initially. The leash walking was like, this dog was all over the place. Anytime I would see a car, I would try to dart away from it, this and that. And yesterday, just from 1 week of working on it, the dog was controlling the impulse. The dog was no longer acting all scared when the cars would go by. And every now and then we would see him like try to kind of, veer off or this or that. We would hold him accountable for it. And he was like 100 times better with it. So, we made some further tweaks to it. We actually started working on like off-leash heeling this time with the dog in a controlled way with a long line, obviously. Actually, I think we used a flexi lead. Shout out last episode, the flexi lead, the tool of 2025. And we were able to make a ton of progress with it. So my recommendation for you have again, fearful Rottweiler that chooses flight whenever it's scared of stuff. Hold the dog accountable for a known expectation, right? When you are out in public around these things the dog is scared of, you've got to break that cycle of he sees things and he just darts away from it, but you've got to get him doing the work, right? This is a big variable with this. There's a lot of people will be like, oh, okay, well, I'll make the dog heel when they're around the things. The dog's scared of it. And they won't make the dog heel. They'll just like physically hold the dog in the heel position, right? Like, ironically, the same dog I'm talking about that we worked with yesterday, she had a harness on the dog with like a handle so that anytime cars would come by historically in the past, she would just grab this handle and keep the dog next to her. But the dog wasn't learning anything from it because it wasn't doing any of the work. Right? It was literally just being physically held in position. So you've got to get the dog to do the work, which means that you have to have a concrete expectation and a concrete way to hold the dog accountable for that expectation. And that's how you'll ultimately learn to get past it, right? This goes hand in hand with something, we'll get to the Instagram comments in a minute here, but this goes hand in hand with something else that I was working on with the dog Riggs, who you guys have heard me talk about on this podcast before, who we read his review last time and stuff. We did a session maybe a week or so ago. And in the session, we were working on being handled at the vet, right? And we basically worked on a pressure and release drill where I would hold the dog by the collar loosely, like not putting any tension on. Somebody would approach to go examine the dog, obviously. And then inevitably, he would start kind of thrashing around and flailing and this and that. And we would hold him accountable for that. I would apply pressure. And as soon as he relaxed, I would release again, right? And in that session we made like massive progress with this dog being able to be interacted with in ways that it historically didn't like, which preps it for vet visits. But the thing was, the owner had said, she was like, oh, well, like, I've tried this before. What's different? To which I explained, most people try to do some variation of holding the dog in one spot at the vet while the vet comes in and interacts with them. But the problem is the entire time they're doing it, there's no release of pressure ever, right? They're literally just holding the dog tight. They're like bear hugging them in one spot. Even if the dog's not fighting, there's tons of tension on them because they're anticipating the dog flailing and freaking out and stuff. So because of that, the entire time you may get through the vet visit, or you may get through the nail trim, or you may get through the grooming appointment, but the dog didn't learn anything from it because it was a fight the entire time, right? So you've got to get the dog to be compliant, right? And like I said, the pressure and release drill we did with Riggs was teaching him when you fight, there's pressure, but the second you loosen up, there's no pressure. So you could start to get that prediction error like we just talked about, where the dog thinks something scary is going to happen. They thrash and flail. We hold them accountable for that. Then they relax, we relax, and they become accepting of the thing that's about to happen in that moment, right? And because they become accepting of it, we break that cycle then at that point. So yeah, it was super cool.
Heck yeah.
What do you got, Josh?
Well, we have the one from Instagram from Got It Dog Training. Says,
more than just that one. You're skipping one.
I don't have another one.
You're skipping like 3.
Oh.
It's 4. Oh, no, the 4th one is you. Jeez. Oh, you know what? You probably joined it after these ones came through.
Okay, yeah.
Okay.
So get them. Yeah.
So we got Ray of Sunshine Shiba asked, what's your favorite way to build bonds with dogs? By the way, hello, Justine on YouTube. Ask some questions if you want. What's your favorite way to build bonds with dogs? This is a tough question because it's multi-layered, right? A lot of people, when they think, what's your favorite way to build bonds with dogs? They think you're going to say things like, oh, do training for positive reinforcement, play tug, throw a ball, go for an off-leash hike, this and that. But everybody forgets that the real bond, the real relationship starts with making sure it's built on the proper foundation of a dog listening to you. Right. And nobody wants to talk about this and be like, oh, like your dog should just be a slave to you or anything like that. And that's not what I'm saying. But like, if you don't have a relationship established where ultimately your dog understands that you are in control and have the ultimate say of things, and if you need to get them to do something, that they have to do it, then all that other stuff is meaningless. Every single person that I work with, every freaking client out there has played tug with their dog, thrown a ball for their dog, done tons of training for positive reinforcement with their dog, probably tried to do some off-leash stuff with their dog around no distractions and stuff. But there was always this threshold where the dog knew, hey, if I want to do this thing, I'm still going to do this thing, right? So basically, they were only ever doing anything with the owner if there was something in it for them.
Yeah.
Right? And we could sit here and debate, like, what's better, like is the respect more important than all those fun things? Like, is there ever a circumstance where a dog just listens to an owner because it's mutually beneficial, et cetera, et cetera? Like, we could sit here and debate that all day long. But I think at the end of the day, with your dog, if you want to enjoy your dog to the fullest, which is people forget the reason why we get dogs, then you have to be able to communicate to the dog that ultimately I have the say in things, which is why I tell people most owners build relationships with dogs in this order. They build it on love and attention and like soft fun, cuddling on the couch, things like that. And then they try to sprinkle in all of these rules and stuff. But because everything is so skewed in one direction, it's so skewed in the direction of like, oh, like, why would I believe, why would I believe you when you try to set this boundary? Because all the other things that we do with each other are because I want to do them, and it's like you're fighting the dog then the whole time, right?
Yeah.
Where when I build relationships with dogs, like when dogs come in for board and trains, I joke that for the first like week or so, it's just, like I might not even like pet the dog one time. Like we do fun things, right? Like we go for walks, we go on field trips and they socialize with other dogs and things like that. But I'm building a relationship where they know that I'm there to guide their behavior.
Yep.
That's it. Right? I'm there to guide your behavior and it's non-negotiable, right? So then when I sprinkle in and add in all the fun stuff on the back end, like once we have the training established and it's like, man, now we're going and playing chuck it at the field all the time. Now we're going for off-leash hikes. Now we're like going on patios and hanging out and we're doing all these fun things. It's built with the understanding that they still have to listen to you.
Yeah.
Right? And in my opinion, that is the way to have a relationship with your dog, right? Dogs are, like I said, they're living in your home under your rules. Like it's like with kids, right? Like with your children, the children still have to know that they have to listen to you.
Yeah.
Right? Like it's like they you hear all the time, like people talk about it. I'm sure everybody had that friend who was just like their parent, like growing up was like their best friend, which is great. Like I want people to have a great relationship with their parents, but then it's like anytime the parent tried to get them to do something, it's like it was a debate of like, why should I do this? Because like we have this friend relationship with each other. That's it.
Yeah.
And that gets obviously messy, right?
Yeah, you had another question before we got it.
So that's my favorite way. Build it on structure and rules and the dog understanding that you have the ultimate say so, then add all the fun stuff in after and whatever your dog likes and whatever you like. That's the best way to build a bond with your dog.
Yeah. You had one more before we got it?
Yeah. It's not even a question. That's me said you've worked wonders with Frankie the Great Dane. I know his mom. Thank you so much. Frankie the Great Dane is an awesome dog that recently did a board and train with us. You guys have probably seen there was a YouTube video we made on like we used him as an example of like some really basic things people can do to fix their walk, right? A lot of times trainers focus on like what do you need to do as opposed to what shouldn't you do. So like we broke down, I think it was like 5 things that people will mindlessly do on their walk that's like making their walk go like way worse, right? And Frankie is the dog we used for that, and it went awesome. So
nice. All right, so now we're at Got It Dog?
Yeah.
All right. They said they unfortunately had to go, but they will come back to hear their question later. But do you allow the client to choose what training package they want, or do you choose for them?
Good question. So we only offer 2 programs, right? And the programs have nothing to do with the dog. They have everything to do with the owner. So the decision is theirs to make, right? Like we have a one-on-one behavior mod program or we have a board and train behavior mod program. And we have designed both of those where I don't care what dog you bring to us, we can solve the issue in both of those programs. But one is going to require something different from you. Obviously, one-on-ones, you got to do a lot more of the work. With board and train, obviously, we're doing a little bit more of the work. So, obviously, they're welcome to choose, but that's the reason why we have them structured out that way.
Nice. Okay, back over to YouTube. Justine says, can I ask if Pavlov method really helps with dogs full of leash reactivity, like charging cat, dogs, moving objects, sounds, full of prey things?
So this is a weird question because Pavlov's method is not like a training program, right? Pavlov basically just studied classical conditioning, right? So classical conditioning is used in every single training program that's ever existed, right? Like whether you're training with a force-free trainer, like force-free trainers are going to be utilizing classical conditioning in the form of clickers, verbal markers, things like that. Classical conditioning is used to obviously train commands, right? So you're pairing neutral words with behaviors. Classical conditioning is used in compulsion-based training where you're creating a lot of consequences and boundaries and things like that. Classical or Pavlov's method is really just the study of classical conditioning, right? And there's a little bit more to that than he just did, but in a nutshell, it's the study of classical conditioning, which no matter what the training program is, you're going to be using. So it's hard to say, does Pavlov's method help with dogs full of leash reactivity? Because it's like, I mean, sure, yeah. Like Pavlov's method works with any type of behavioral issue depending on the context it's being used in, right? When you have dogs that are, very prey driven, so like chasing cats or things like that, I would be using a classically conditioned punishment marker in order to prevent that chasing. And yes, that 1,000,000% works. We have a dog that we just finished a board and training with right now that was like trying to like murder the owner's cats, right? And the dog's been home a week and we've been able to completely stop all of the cat chasing, right? And we've been able to do it by attaching a conditioned in punishment marker to the act of chasing cats, right? And we did that, we were able to stop it, and life is good, right? But the way the question is worded is a little bit weird because I think we look at things a little bit too much like individual, like this is its own method, this is its own method, this is its own method, as opposed to dog training as a whole being like an art form. And in Pavlov's methods, if you will, are just tools in your toolbox that you would use in conjunction with many other tools in your toolbox. So yeah, but like I said, it's kind of a difficult question to answer for that reason.
Cool. Sane said, thank you. It makes sense to your answer to their question. The owner has to follow through.
The owner has to follow through, but I never really, it's more than just that because I work with and this is just, a tangent, if you will. I work with so many owners that have been to multiple other trainers and like the trainers probably all thought, oh, the owners just don't freaking follow through. You know what I mean? But then they come to us and they're successful. So it's like, it's not, the owner following through is a piece of the puzzle, but like we forget that as trainers, we need to give the owner the best information possible to follow through with. Because like, let's use cat chasing as an example. And let's say I was trying to just, I don't know, to differential reinforce away, cat chasing and like, reward the dog for alternative behaviors and do all sorts of shit like that. Like I could have the most committed owner in the world that's following through and they're not going to be successful. And at a certain point, they're going to stop fucking doing it because it's not successful. And then as a trainer, I would say, oh, the owner didn't follow through, but it's because I gave him bullshit advice, Mm-hmm. And this is my biggest issue with a lot of behavioral modification training programs out there that I see is owners make it so difficult for their clients to follow through.
Yeah.
They'll literally give them 7,000 things to do per day, per week. And it's like, it's borderline impossible for the owner to follow through the way that they need to follow through in order to get the success, right? So let's make sure we're also focusing on making stuff as easy as possible for owners so that they are most likely to follow through. So.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Next one would be Nomac. They ask, what's your POV on working breeds as pets and how to manage those drives and energies without micromanaging them, but not lose your house in the process?
It's a good question. My POV on it. I did an entire podcast episode on this that I always reference people back to when they ask similar questions. It was called Struggling with Your Dog's Energy, Watch This, or something like that. I want to say it was maybe like 20 episodes ago or so. And I think that was the best, most compiled podcast I've ever done on discussing energy, because it was started from me starting to see a lot of stuff out there of people talking about owning working dogs, and trainers were basically saying all this shit about like you have to have the dog in place all the time to like help with the dog's state of mind. And when you release your dog from place, if the dog releases with too much energy, you should be correcting them for it. And like you should only be having the dog be calm all the time and this and that. And it was all just fucking useless information, honestly. It was absolutely useless information because like all you're doing is micromanaging the dog then at that point. And all you're doing is punishing the dog for arousal levels that the dogs aren't aware of, right? It's not like in your car how you have a fucking odometer or not odometer. It's
speedometer?
No. It's RPMs. Tachometer.
Yeah, tachometer.
They have like a tachometer that says like, oh, we're at 1,000 RPMs of speed or 2,000 RPMs of speed or 3,000. It's not like you have that where your dog can look at it and be like, oh, well, I redline at fucking 4,000 RPMs and that's when I start getting corrected for stuff. Like it's impossible. Like if you really try to look at, does your dog actually fucking understand when they get corrected for being too excited in the moment? They can't, right? So I did an entire podcast episode basically talking about most people when they say that their dog is too much energy, right? When they have their dog is too aroused and they want to stop it, usually if you look more deeply at it, there actually are specific things the dog is doing when they get that worked up that's causing them to drive you crazy, right? So my dog gets crazy aroused and then barks out the window. My dog gets crazy aroused and jumps all over my guest. My dog gets crazy aroused, then tries to steal food off my counter, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? So we talked about looking more specifically at what are the problem behaviors, right? Stopping those for good so that you don't have to micromanage your dog. And then when your dog, because there are still times where your dog's energy is too high. Like I own a Malinois. My point of view on working breeds as pets, like he's a pet for me, right? He's not a working dog at this point.
Yeah.
He's literally a pet. He's downstairs right now, loose, probably sleeping on his dog bed, just kind of hanging out. And he's fine, right? He doesn't drive me crazy. Like everybody always says, oh, you get a Malinois, like, oh, they're going to drive you crazy if they don't have a fucking job. Vinny hasn't had a job since he was like 2 years old, right? And he doesn't drive me crazy, right? But that's because I've stopped the problems like I just discussed. And then in the situations where he does just have like 120% energy and is a little fucking annoying, I've needed to strategically look at what is it that's getting him so... That was it.
I accidentally hit. Sorry.
What is it that's getting him so aroused in the first place? And like, what can I do to combat that arousal? Because there's always a reason why. There's an underlying cause for like, why does this situation stimulate your dog so much that even though they're not doing anything wrong, their energy is so high? And you could solve those problems. You could reverse engineer it. In that whole podcast episode, I broke all those things down. And I think that is one of the most beneficial podcasts I've ever done for people that have working breeds that are pets in the house. Because there's no reason why you can't have a working breed as a pet in the house, as long as you're going to be a good, firm owner on them over stuff, right?
Cool. All right. We have to go over to Instagram real quick. We'll be right back to the YouTube questions, but this one's been here for a minute. Ray of Sunshine's Sheba says, my dog likes to stop and stare at dogs. She won't walk toward them, but just stares. I'm worried that punishing her will make a negative association with seeing dogs and inadvertently make her reactive. Should I just call her and redirect her attention?
What are you punishing? So this is like, again, the thing that I'm kind of pushing is like, what do you want to, like, why is staring at a dog is not a problem? Right? I talk about this all the time as well. I don't correct for loading. I don't, correct for the buildup or anything like that. I let dogs make decisions, but it's like, we have to look at like, what's wrong with staring in that moment. Now, if you were telling me I'm trying to get my dog to heel with me right? And the dog won't heel with me because they keep staring at other dogs. They get distracted by a dog, they stop and stare, and they're no longer heeling with me. Well, your punishment at that point has nothing to do with staring at another dog. It has to do with they're not doing the command, right? So punish them for it. They won't make the correlation that, oh my God, it's going to make me reactive or anything like that. It's just not how it works, right? But on the contrary, if you're just saying like, I'm loose in the field, we're hanging out, I'm throwing the ball for my dog, they're not in command or anything like that, and they stop and stare at another dog, it's like, so, right? Like there's no issue with that. If you want to test and see how distracted is my dog by this, you could do what you had discussed, which is, give them a recall, see if they listen to it, and then if they don't, again, give a correction for it, obviously, and then if they don't listen to it, obviously give a correction for it. If they do listen to it, great. But the staring is not a problem. And they just replied, I guess I'm just worried that the other dog will take it as an invite to engage. Yep. Well, this also gets back to then like what are the situations you're describing, right? Is it you're out on a walk and again, you're letting the dog sniff around and stuff, but they're on a leash, the other dog's on a leash, and your dog stops and stares at the other dog, and the other dog gets triggered by that, like what? That's the other dog's problem. That's not your dog's problem. But if you're saying that your dog's off leash in a place where there's other off leash dogs and your dog stares at those dogs and those dogs may run over, well, then you're probably letting your dog off leash in places you shouldn't be letting them off leash in. So yeah, they said, and not all dogs take kindly to staring from other dogs. Again, like that doesn't mean that staring at another dog is bad. That means that other dog is poorly behaved, right? And it's not your responsibility to make sure somebody else's dog doesn't react at your dog. That's like saying if I walk 4 feet past another dog, well, some dogs don't take kindly to being walked 4 feet past. It's like, well, sorry, like train your dog better. You know what I mean? Like what do you want me to do about that? Right.
Yeah.
So it's all of this is context dependent, which is why it's always hard for dog trainers like us to answer hypothetical situations with things. Because if you had an exact scenario, like, okay, last week I was off leash in a field playing ball with my dog, and my dog was not approaching other dogs or anything, but like another dog was walking by on leash, and my dog just stared at them but never did anything, and the other dog exploded at my dog. Like, I would say, don't worry about it. Yeah. There's nothing. Your dog didn't do anything wrong. The other dog did, right? But if you're saying that, again, you're heeling at the park and your dog stopped to stare at another dog and the other dog exploded at your dog, well, I still don't care about what the other dog is doing, but your dog should have still been heeling with you, so we should have corrected them for it, but it has nothing to do with the staring, right? So this is what I mean about look more deeply into the specific problem that you're having, and if it's a compliance issue, address the compliance issue. If you're worried your dog is going to start reacting, wait till your dog starts reacting, then correct them for it. Don't correct proactively for the staring, and just kind of approach things from that light. So nice. I'm going to stop ranting on that.
Okay. Really quickly before we go back to YouTube, Michelle just said, love your page. Keep crushing it.
By the way, Birdie's DIY, does this podcast have a topic we need to stay on? Absolutely not. You could ask me literally anything. I don't give a shit.
Yeah.
Doesn't even have to be dog related.
Yeah. I said dog related, but yeah, if you want to ask him about his golf swing, he'll do that too. All right. Trey has bunches of questions, which is great. First of all, do we have these live saved? Yes, this will be a podcast episode live here on YouTube.
We don't save them as live, so this will not be like a replayable live, but this will be next week's podcast episode that you can go back and watch.
There we go. Okay, so his first question is, I have a Frenchie mix, 4 months old, and wondering what is the best way for him to use his food, rarely as motivation.
Wait, sorry, can you ask that one more time?
Yeah, I have a Frenchie mix, 4 months old, and wondering what is the best way for him to use his food? Rarely as motivation for him to listen and be able to work. I think. I don't. Is he asking like?
Hold on.
Yeah, I think there might be a link.
Frenchie mix, 4 months old, and wondering what is the best way for him to use his food. Rarely as motivation for him to listen and be able to work with. Okay, so if you're asking me, how should I use the dog's food? Should I use it in training? Should I feed the dog out of a bowl? Totally up to you, right? I'm a big proponent, if you're doing positive reinforcement training with your dog early on and things, big proponent of working dogs for meals, right? Now, There's a lot that goes into making sure that you're not overfeeding the dog. Then at that point, you have to have good food drive established first, which we have a blog post on our website, miraclecaninetraining.com, that you could read on developing food drive with your dog if you're struggling with that. If you are struggling with motivation issues, usually that's you're feeding the dog too much, your routines aren't consistent enough, stuff like that. If what you're saying is you've been fighting with the dog to get the dog motivated for the food, you just can't really get it, the dog isn't motivated enough for the training, it's like, don't use the food then. Either find something higher value or, train with more of a compulsion-based approach. No problem at all with that.
Okay, cool. All right, Justine has another one. May I ask if there's a certain day or week to train a dog with severe activity? In my case, I train owners and dogs more than 2 months and it work, but some owners rush for results.
Again, I don't know if I fully understand the question, but if you're asking how much time as a trainer you should have with your clients, not too much, but not too little. Err on the side of longer, but strive to provide results quick. So under promise, over deliver. We do a minimum of 10 weeks with a client, right? Over the course of 10 weeks, usually we're able to root out most of their reactivity within the first 4, I would say, 4 to 5. And then the back end of it is all about teaching the dog to then be consistent with not being reactive and then work through the client's handling issues. So I strive to, if there's a big problem, it shouldn't take me that long to get the dog to not rehearse that problem. But then it's like the honeymoon stage of things, right? I could do I've done single sessions with people where it's like borderline, we solve all their fucking hopes and dreams in one session. But it's like, I know that the owner has not retained enough of what I did and what I needed to do to solve that problem to then maintain it for the next 5 to 10 years, right? So by having more time with your client after you've solved the problem, you could fine tune all of the little things to make sure they stay consistent long-term. It's like with board and trains also, right? We do a 4-week program. We could solve everything in 2 weeks probably, right? But 4 weeks is enough to let the dog then be successful with it. And then on the back end, usually what'll happen is we do one-on-ones with the client for the first 4 weeks back home. And then after those 4 weeks, we almost 100% of the time run into the client, calls us about 6 weeks later and they say, hey, I'm struggling with this issue again. And usually what it is the honeymoon stage of dog training where things are going so much better than they were before that the client becomes complacent with better as opposed to exactly what it needs to be. So what happens is their boundaries start getting a little bit grayer, things get a little more inconsistent, and it slowly slips back over the course of the next month or two to where it was before. And we got to go in and show them then the importance of all the little things that they were missing out on. So to answer your question, strive to solve your issues early in the program, right? It shouldn't take 10 weeks to solve reactivity, right? You should be able to solve it early in the program, but then the rest of your sessions should be to then fine tune what the owner is doing to make sure things go well.
Perfect. All right. I'm going to skip down to Trey's response real quick. He said, okay, great to know. He's going to watch for sure. And he's still figuring out the routine for the food for the what was that, Frenchie? He's not interested into toys at the moment for training, but I'd love to see him use it for motivation instead of food.
Mm-hmm. Maybe. Depends on what the dog wants, though. Don't get too stuck on a picture in your head of what you want the dog to be motivated by. That's a big mistake that people make. And there's a big mistake that trainers make, too, is they get stuck on what they want their success with their clients to look like, as opposed to focusing on what the client really wants. So focus on what your dog really wants. Maybe your dog doesn't care that much about toys, right? My one dog doesn't care about chasing a ball, doesn't really care about tugging, but likes chewing on toys here and there, right? That's fine. I'm not going to force them to love those other things. Sure, there's some ways you could increase drive a little bit and things like that, but the more you try to force it, the more conflict sometimes you can create, as opposed to if your dog just likes sniffing around in the backyard all day, I don't know, let him sniff around in the backyard all day. I don't know.
Right.
Work with the dog, not against the dog with those types of things.
Nice. All right. So his next question was, how long have you been training dogs for, and what do you think about Beckman dog training methods? Training in general, so not including professionally also, probably 13 years or so. Training professionally, I started Miracle Canine in January of 2019. So Miracle Canine I've now had for 6 years. And I had another dog training company before that started in, was it 2015? Mm-hmm. About
15. So what is that? 12 years? Something like that?
yeah.
No, 10 years. Yeah, no, we're in our 10th year of business right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. 10th year of business working for myself. Worked for another dog trainer before that for 2 years. So that was 12 years. And then, like I said, about a year of me doing it by myself. It's about 13 years in total. Beckman's dog training. We did a review on him. You could watch it.
Yeah. Okay. We're just going to hop back over to Instagram real quick. Michelle said, I'm a dog groomer, and I think I talk with customers more about training than grooming, constantly referring everyone to you local trainers.
Love that. That's great. And as a groomer, as good groomers, like most groomers are better dog handlers than most dog trainers out there.
That's true.
Now, there are a lot of shitty dog groomers out there. Don't get me wrong, right? But most good dog groomers, like your understanding of the things we were talking about at the beginning of this episode of, pressure and release and teaching dogs to like accept certain things and stuff, your skill level needs to be really high to do those things effectively. Yeah. And I'll tell you, there was one good groomer in Cleveland that we used to refer clients to all the time, and they went out of business, or they didn't go out of business. I think she retired. And right now, like I have like nobody that I could refer like good, dogs.
Yeah.
Like none of them are just like equipped to like work with dogs. Yeah. Like I don't know. So they're good at grooming, but like you forget how much training goes into grooming. So
she said, I'm a great one, I promise.
Well, if you're local, let's connect.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah.
All right. So Renewed Canine Training asked, during your private lesson program, do you typically begin punishing unwanted behavior right out of the gate? Or are there benchmarks in the training that you want to get to before punishing certain behaviors?
It just depends. I mean, there's not really a concrete answer to that. It just depends on what we're working on. It depends on, where the dog's at. It depends on how much of a pain in the ass the dog is being for the owner. Like, there are some dogs where, like, they are so fucking bananas out of control in the house, whether aggressive or not, right? Yeah. And they are just driving the owners so fucking insane, and the relationship is so toxic. We need to just go in and stop a couple things first.
Yeah.
Right? There are others where it's like they got problem behaviors, but like let's work with the dog a little bit. Let's do some teaching first, and then we'll kind of get on them later about things. And then there are some that are just really out of control, dangerous, where we have to stop stuff right away. So it really all just depends on the dog.
Okay. Michelle said, come to Texas. So unfortunately.
Bummer.
Yep. And then we had someone say hello.
Hello.
And now we're going to go back to YouTube. No, let's see. Birdie said, oh, what do you think about blue-haired people that bash balance trainer methods, including your video with the black reactive dog with the bonker episode that never actually showed them working?
You're referring to Canine Tay. Canine Tay's made a ton of videos about us. Canine Tay I invited to be on the podcast one time, and she accepted, and then like a couple days later told me she had like a family emergency come up and couldn't come and do it. Which, listen, if you had a family emergency, I'm sympathetic to that, obviously. But then like the family emergency turned into like, I'm not going to be, I was like, okay, well, when can we reschedule for? And she was like, I don't know. My next like 6 months are too crazy. So she wasn't able to do it. So, no opinions.
Yeah, we'll leave it to that
Come
one.
on the pod if you want.
Yeah. No Mac asked another question. They asked, do you still have shadow programs for trainers?
Mm-hmm. So the shadow program is for trainers that have their own businesses already. Mostly. I mean, listen, like anybody's welcome to do it, but it's predominantly for trainers that have their own business that don't need to learn how to train dogs. They want to learn how to structure programs better, communicate with clients better, run their business better, do things like that. Yes, we still offer that for sure. For people that want to learn how to train dogs, I always say a shadow program isn't what you want. It's going to be too far above where you're at, where you're not going to take that much away from it, where you're much more better off doing an actual one-on-one program with us, and then us catering it towards not just training you how to train your dog, but teaching you why we're doing the things that we're doing also.
Okay. Aaron asked, probably going back to retail management, not getting enough hours as a dog trainer. I love it, but can't feed my family on 20 hours a week.
I get that.
Yeah.
It's hard out here. It's tough because like you need to have if you're new in the dog training field, you can't just do it on your own because like you need to learn, right? But you need to have the support from somebody else that's going to be able to invest the time into you to be able to learn those things, right? So it's like it's tough, like getting into the dog field, like.
You said not my own company too.
Well, yeah, obviously, right? Like, so it just depends. Like, if you're at a place where you learned enough from these people where you feel like you could do it on your own, it's like awesome. But like, if not, like, yeah, you got to find somebody that you could mentee under, if you will, So I get it. It's hard. And there's 1,000,001 dog trainers out there too. So like, I even have, people that I know who have come and do shadow programs, who I had one, earlier this year reach out to me and say, hey, like, I'm really slow. Like, I'm not getting the business that I want. What can I do differently? And, there were some tweaks we talked about making, obviously, that were able to help improve on that. And I believe he resolved the issue at this point. But it's hard, getting consistent business for that stuff.
Yeah. Queen23 on Instagram said, thank you for all the info. Queen, if you have any of your own questions, let us know.
Yeah. Ask away.
Ask away. Right. We have, I think, Kangar. Can you talk about resource guarding and that the dog is not a human's best friend, but using it towards its advantage? I don't know. You might have to read that one yourself.
Is this on Instagram?
No, it's on YouTube here.
Oh, yeah. Can you talk about resource guarding and that the dog is not a human's best friend, but using it towards its advantage? Okay, I believe this is two different questions. One is talk about resource guarding. Okay. I could answer questions about resource guarding. I don't know if I could generally just talk about it. I'm not that great at that. As far as dog not being human's best friend, but using it to its advantage, I think what they're implying with this is like, people need to start realizing that like dogs do things for their advantage, right? And we humanize it and say, we're besties, right? But in actuality, dogs do things because there's something in it for them, which is why we talked about when we were discussing like building bonds with your dog. There's like, there's so much like, there's so much more to it than just being their best friend. You have to establish the control and leadership first, right? You have to make sure the dog understands they still have to do things, because without it, they are only ever doing things towards their advantage, right? Or using us towards their advantage, which is why you will see with a lot of clients who have built these like best friend relationships with their dog, on things like that, they will have a lot of guarding issues where the dog guards the owner. And a lot of people think, oh my God, my dog's trying to protect me because they love me so much and my dog would freaking die for me and stuff. I've heard that 1,000,000 times. People say, my dog would die for me. And I'm like, do you really understand how deep of a emotional state that is and that you're putting on your dog? Whatever. Anyways.
Right.
You're just a resource to your dog at that point. You know what I mean? Like your dog literally is just seeing you as the source of things that they want when they want to get it. So they're protecting you as a resource, which is like almost like an insulting thing. Like if your dog's guarding you from that standpoint because you're nothing more than the vending machine to them, like I don't want to have that kind of relationship with my dog.
Yeah.
So that's, I guess, my 2-second take on that.
For sure. All right. Next one is Malia. Question on your video, level up your dog's fetch game. When the dog broke down, you said no and didn't correct, but it was negative punishment. Is it helpful to have a separate word for that? Because when you use e-collar with no marker, dog might flinch in anticipation of e-collar correction.
So you can if you want to, right? You could have 2 separate words for it, but keep in mind, regardless of a dog flinching in anticipation of an e-collar correction or a dog receiving a no marker and not getting the toy, both are an emotionally devastating consequence for them, right? They really don't like either or, right?
Yeah.
So the way I've always looked at it is like, you're probably like in that context you're describing where I say no and I don't give a correction, but the punishment is them not receiving the toy in that moment. It's probably like a twofold thing of, and this is where I'm going to get I always try to get really deep and scientific with things. This is where I'm not going to be able to have as concrete of an answer to this as I probably should. But the conditionedness of the no marker in that moment is like already pre-aversive to the dog due to that anticipation. And they're anticipating something bad happening, and something bad still happens, right? So I still view it as using a punishment marker correctly. But if you want to have two separate ones, you can. A lot of people will use like no and wrong, right? And they call wrong a non-reinforcement marker, which is basically the same thing for a negative punishment marker. I just find that marker in that moment, it's hard to properly condition that in. It's really, really hard to properly condition that in because it's not, when you look at negative punishment, like it's hard to be really specific with it. You know what I mean? So I don't know. I use them together. As long as something negative happens after the marker, the fact that marker is already preconditioned in a little bit, I find they could correlate that negative punishment to the thing they were doing when they heard no much more effectively because it's easier to condition in one with positive punishment than with negative punishment. So
nice. All right, back to Instagram. We have DogPound19. When you have a dog with demonstrated aggression over resources, do you believe you can fully rehab or focus on management? I have a pitty that has very good obedience, but food is trigger for aggression around other dogs, not people.
Read it one more time.
Sure. When you have a dog with demonstrated aggression over resources.
Okay, so the dog has shown very clear aggression over resources.
Yes.
Got it. Yeah.
Do you believe they can be fully rehabbed or focus on management? And he has a pitty that has very good obedience everywhere, but food is a trigger for aggression.
So depends on towards dogs or towards people. I think
he said towards dogs.
Towards dogs.
Yeah.
Okay. I think it's a very normal thing for dogs to resource guard things from one another. I think it's really, really, really normal. I think it's way more normal than we think. I think that when you start getting into dogs guarding things towards people, that's where it skews a little bit because through domestication, we should have kind of rooted out a lot of dogs that are aggressive towards humans, right? But towards dogs, like they're their own species. They compete with each other. It's in their DNA, right? And then you get into like the pack animal side of things. And a lot of times the resource guarding is towards dogs that are like not dogs they live with and et cetera, et cetera. Like I think it's just a normal thing. So because it's a normal thing, I think it's always kind of a game of management, but the management can hit a point where it's like not a problem. So with my 4 dogs, when I first introduced each one to each other, I had to do a lot of work for months, right, of like managing resources. When I gave a resource, I had to be mindful of, hey, you're chewing this bone. You're not allowed to go steal that bone. You're not allowed to go steal that bone. You're not allowed to go hog all of them in the corner, et cetera, et cetera. You know what I mean? Like I managed it through creating consequences for those types of things. Then as the dogs got better with it, I made it even harder. Like you guys have seen the videos of me feeding my 4 dogs together in a space that's like 4 foot by 4 foot, right? And I could do that because I've established such good control over resources. And they just kind of know that they're not allowed to do those types of things, that they don't feel like they need to guard food, right? Or guard anything, frankly. And I think that a lot of people jump too quick into just thinking the dog should manage those resources themselves. But like, why would a dog not try to take a bone from another dog? And why would that dog that's getting it taken from them not like try to steal it back? You know what I mean? Or try to guard it when that dog tries to do it. So I think that there are certain dogs that have a hot, like resource guarding is a bit of a spectrum. You have some dogs that just kind of like get tense and protective over toys. You have some dogs that'll just kind of growl and snap, and you have other dogs that'll try to like attack other dogs over it. So when the more severe it is, the more you have to be on your P's and Q's about managing it. But I think no matter if the dog has shown straight up aggression or not, it's something that needs managed with all multi-dog households, right?
Yeah.
So this is where like when we talk with people that have really dangerous dogs, right, that come in for behavioral modification training, like a part of the game is figuring out like the risk to reward of the situation. Like in this scenario, if your management fails, because everything in behavioral modification is management to a degree, right? There's always, every dog has a threshold where things teeter over the edge and like you lose control over them, right? No matter how much you've stopped things or changed their association with things or anything like that, there's always a degree of management. If the management that we put in place fails with this dog, one, how likely is it that that management is going to fail? And two, if it fails, what is the cost of it failing, right? And if we're saying that, like, you know, this dog in the house, when it has a toy, right? Like, I mean, there's multiple layers, right? If this dog has a really high value toy, it'll literally try to kill another dog. It's like, okay, well, can I keep really high value toys out of the mix? And is it that bad with lower value toys? If it's not, then I could build some success on that. And like, I could know that most of the time, 99.9% of circumstances, I could make sure there's not high value toys out with all these dogs, right? If we're saying the dog is that intense about things with even lower value toys, it's like, okay, well, I could work through that problem and make it better, right? But there's still a potential of it happening if I miss something. Or I could remove those altogether, but with lower value toys, you run a lot more of a risk of a dog just picking something random up off of the ground and then it being perceived as a lower value toy and then them doing the same thing. Like, the risk is much higher in that situation where it's like you start getting in the conversation of should this dog be living with other dogs then at that point. So it's like there's just so many variables to it. But everything I look at with resource guarding is management. As far as, you know, how safe the situation is, that just depends on the individual circumstances.
Yeah. They said, I think that's a great perspective. She lives with 3 others and generally okay. Every now and then it's in close quarters. So.
Every now and then what is with close quarters? Like resource guarding in close quarters, we're saying?
I'm guessing.
Because then again, I would look at, like, is that a resource guarding issue, or does the dog just not like being cornered in close quarters with other dogs? Yeah. You know, which is a whole nother solution, if you will, we would have to look at. That usually is rooted in a lot of other places where managing stuff. When people tell me stuff like that is happening, a lot of times they're micromanaging their household a lot, where like they keep the dogs out of the hallways, right? They never address some of these issues head on, right? And they avoid them until they can't avoid them anymore, and then something bottles up and happens.
Let's see. Okay, Michelle again, she said, so our husky, who's been our problem child from the beginning, he showed signs of resource guarding his food early on. The way they resolved it was by giving him something delicious while feeding him. Then he associated people being around his bowl with something positive. What do you think of this method?
If it works for you, great. I think with minor resource guarding issues or dogs that are just uncomfortable with having people around, you could do that and like it's not that big of a deal. You know what I mean? Like, you'll probably be able to get a lot of success with it. Serious resource guarding, I think your dogs just don't want to be messed with, right? So whether you're throwing a high value toy in or not, it's like they just want to be left alone while they're eating, right? And it's like you're kind of, in my opinion, like looking at it the wrong way. Like, why does the dog need to have a positive association with us near them? Why can't they just have an association of like, we're not a threat? Because I look at it that way. If they're resource guarding, they think we're a threat. So it's like, I don't need you to have a positive association. Like, me being near your bowl and constantly approaching and throwing treats in, for a lot of dogs, is still you a threat. So you're going to make it worse then at that point, because you're still doing things that's reassuring them that you're a threat. But with some dogs, it will work. So I would say, like, if it works for you, great. Like, we hear people talk about all the time, doing things that I always say, like, hey, you probably shouldn't do that. And they're like, oh, it worked for me. I'm like, cool, right? I wouldn't do it, but if it worked for you, great.
Yeah, as long as it worked. All right, Trey has another question. What are the 3 main reasons a dog becomes leash reactive? Meaning, what are 3 main things humans might do to make it worse without knowing?
On-leash greetings, letting the dog dictate everything on the walk, and constant tension on the leash.
Boom. Mic drop on that one?
Sure.
Okay. Let's see. Have you heard of Hamilton dog training on YouTube? If so, can you share some advice on if I should get info from him?
Guys, keep in mind, everything on social media, like, you don't get the full picture, right? There's 1,000,001 trainers out there that can put out stuff and look really great on social media, but like their training behind the scenes just isn't that great, right? Or they do an excellent job on social media, but then they don't give their clients the time of day in person or things like that, right? So I can't tell you one way or another. I've seen plenty of his stuff. I like his videos. I've never really seen anything I'm like, oh my God, this guy is out of his mind or posts anything terrible or whatever, you know what I mean? But I can't tell you like, oh, should you be hiring this person for training or things like that? I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't have any issue I like his videos that I've seen.
Yeah. Okay. Birdie's ask another question. What do you consider management versus a behavior you've extinguished, and when/how would you proof then explain that to the owner of the dog as you return it to the owner?
This might be a controversial take, but I think you can get pretty damn close to extinguishing behaviors, but I think you could extinguish behaviors contextually, and I think there will always be limits to how well the dog has generalized that extinction, right? So, like, my dogs don't really jump with me. I can't remember the last time they've tried to jump on somebody. But I know when I go out of town and leave Vera with my parents that she's tried to jump on the counters before, right? She wouldn't ever do it with me, right? Yeah. Or under 99.9% of circumstances, she wouldn't, right? So it's the same deal with board and trains. Like, I prep everybody, like, because it's relationship-based, it's impossible for us while the dog is with us in the board and train to generalize the dog's behavior to the owners, right? Until they go home. So once they go home, we have to generalize it, and we have to then extinguish something that the dog has never done with us with them then at that point. And I'm sure there's a threshold where if I generalized whatever 47 times with 100 different people and corrected jumping all those times, it would truly just go away. The dog would realize they never could do it. But I think as humans, our level of consistency with our punishment and rewards can be near 100%. But I don't know if it will ever be 100% enough to achieve true extinction, right? So that's why I say, like, there's always a degree of management. Doesn't matter on the dog. You will always, to some extent, be managing some circumstances.
Like it. IROC said, "Hey, guy.
What up?"
Hopping over to IG real quick. Kaylin said, car anxiety tips, constant pacing in the back seat, occasional barks, which he gets corrected for the barks, but not for the pacing. Hard to keep him in a down in the back seat for a whole ride.
So you have an impulse control issue. One, if you're going to correct anything, I would correct the pacing, not the barking. Barking is more of a it's probably just like coming out every now and then, right? Where the pacing is this deliberate thing they're doing that when you correct it, they could actually learn to stop, right? But if you can't get the dog to hold a downstay in it, that's an issue that you need to solve, right? You need to probably up the ante on your punishment for non-compliance of it if it's something you know that the dog actually likes, or actually knows, I should say. So that should be a lot easier than you think. But yeah, address the pacing, not the barking, and then get that downstay established. Sometimes you may have to have somebody else drive, and you go in the passenger seat and just sit there and just correct the dog when they break it and make sure they hold that downstay.
Nice. Birdie said that they agree with your stance on the management.
Sweet.
There you go. All right, we got another one here on YouTube from Trey. How can I find my dog's high-value toy when he doesn't want to play with one for more than 15 minutes? I would love to really get him to play tug all the time. Any suggestions?
Just don't worry. You're worrying too much about it, I could tell. Right? If the dog wants to play, let it play. If it doesn't, not every dog has a high-value toy, right? And sometimes if they do have a high-value toy, like let's say their high-value toy is like deer antlers, right? You can't really use a deer antler as reinforcement when doing obedience training. I mean, you could maybe, but like it would be really fucking hard to. So don't worry about maybe toys isn't a good primary reinforcer for your dog. Maybe you need to find something else.
There we go.
Right? Yeah. Find something else. And you mentioned food and treats also. Maybe that's not a primary reinforcer for your dog. Maybe negative reinforcement is a good primary reinforcer for your dog. And you need to lean into negative reinforcement then in order to do it. So the more you fight with your dog to try to get them to do, I've seen owners do this a million times where they really want their dog to tug. Used to see this in the sport dog world a lot. The dog wouldn't have the tug drive they wanted, so they were like constantly trying to force the dog, come on, tug with me, tug with me, tug with me. And it would be like almost so fucking annoying to the dog that the dog would be even less interested in it as time went on, right? So just don't worry so much about it. Find something else that you could use to train your dog with. And it may not be a positive reinforcement. It may not be. It might be a negative reinforcement. That's why there's two reinforcements, right?
Yeah.
Dogs that aren't toy and food motivated, every dog is motivated by negative reinforcement. Every dog is, right? As long as you find something they're averse enough by. So maybe you need to use that. And then maybe you could then find enjoyment by, like I said, just letting your dog off leash in fields,
Yeah.
right? Once you've used negative reinforcement to train their recall, or letting them sniff in fields, right? Or things like that.
Yeah. Caitlin with the car anxiety tips said thank you.
No problem.
Renewed Canine Training asked, what if you allowed a dog to pull on the leash, mostly dictate the walk, and allow on-leash greetings on your terms, but you punish reactive behavior? Will reactivity be eliminated? I don't know. Never tried it.
This is a good question. I think you're fighting a serious uphill battle at that point, right? Because we're basically saying, I'm putting you into this frustrated state of mind, right? You're existing in this frustrated state of mind, but it's going to hit a level where I want to correct for it, right? That's almost the same thing as what I talked about arousal levels. Like the pulling on the leash and pulling towards other dogs, we could argue is reactivity. It is. It's just a more moderate version. You're referencing reactivity not as all of those frustrated displays of behavior you're seeing, but when it turns into the full-on barking at another dog, right? So they won't be able to correlate it's the same thing.
Yeah.
It's the same state of mind, just on different intensities. So I don't think you would get anywhere with that.
Okay. B4 Brando asked, how many times would you put a high drive GSD or BM on a slat/treadmill on a week, like a week?
As much as you want to. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't do a lot of that stuff with my dogs. Like we have a slat mill and a treadmill that we'll use with like our daycare dogs and our board and trains and stuff. But, I don't do it with my dogs. As much as you want to. I mean, there's people that swear by, 25 minutes of treadmill time every day with their dog, right? It's no different than going for a long walk or going and playing chuck it every day with your dog. If you want to use that as a way to exercise them, I don't see a reason why you couldn't do it a lot.
Renewed Canine Training said, good answer.
Thanks.
Yep. Okay. Let's see. Back on YouTube. How would I start working training with a 2-year-old bully who really has no clue of impulse control and other basic behaviors? He's super stubborn.
You just start training him.
Yeah.
Again, hypothetical question. I think you said hypothetically.
Yeah, he said hypothetically.
You just start training him. I mean, it depends on what's the dog coming in for, right? Like, what are the specific things the dog struggles with impulse control with, right? Like, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it just depends. You start training the dog, right? Like, where would you start training a dog if you were training a new dog? Start there.
Yeah.
And then as you start doing that, if you start seeing certain problems arise, it's like you divert a little bit and then you work those things. And then if you start, it's like they say, training what we want it to look like, what it actually looks like. And a lot of this is because as you're going this way, we run into a problem, we got to divert a little bit. As we go this way, we run into another problem, we got to divert a little bit. And it just keeps going, right?
Yep.
So you just got to start training them.
Yeah. All right. Birdie said, I'll watch the Flexi Lead video after this, LOL. I think it's great to give dogs a little more freedom on walks, but they have to listen on a regular leash before they get any extra freedom.
Forget a regular leash. They have to just listen before we give them extra freedom, right? And we kind of elaborate on this in the Flexi Lead video, which is like a Flexi Lead is a great tool to teach the dog to just listen better sometimes. It's not always we think Flexi is exclusively to give freedom. I used like 4 examples of places where we used the Flexi to establish more control actually with the dog, right? So, yeah, watch the video.
Before Brando said, okay, cool.
Sweet.
Kangar says, what type of correction should be done to a puppy compared to a grown dog?
Depends what they're motivated by. It's just you're using an aversive, right? And it depends on what tools we're using. It depends on what the dog's motivated by. A lot of times, this is like, some people say, I don't use prong collars until dogs are 6 months old. Or I don't use e-collars until the dog's 8 months old or whatever. Yeah. It's like, I don't think that matters that much. Now, listen, e-collars, because I think some of the risks of doing it incorrectly with a younger dog are a little bit higher, that one I will kind of put an age limit on. It's harder for them to understand because it's this novel sensation. But prong collars, I'll use prong collars with very, very young puppies, honestly. I'll do that all the time, honestly. And if I have a young dog, they're probably going to be pretty sensitive, and I probably can get away with such little corrections that we're good to go. It doesn't mean I need to use a different type of correction. I need to vary the intensity of the correction. But if I haven't started a prong collar, what other aversives do I have at my disposal, right? Yeah. Pet correctors, small bonkers, squirt bottles, regular flat collar pops, little pinch of the tooth. Like there's a million things you could do. It just depends on what I have access to in the moment. Mm-hmm. But the only thing that would need to change per the age of the dog, and it's not even just the age of the dog, it's just the temperament of the dog really, is the intensity of the consequences that I provide.
Yeah. Aaron says, treadmill is great for the winter in the north and summer in the desert.
Love it.
Mr. Pole 101 said, if there are no good trainers in your area to mentor under, what do you suggest I do?
This is a good question. You need to find somewhere you could just get hands-on with dogs then, and then you need to find a mentor that you could work with virtually. Go volunteer at your local shelter, have access to dogs, and then learn through online courses and play around with that there. The biggest thing is you want to put yourself in a position where before you are charging money from people, you either have been able to prove your methods work, or you have to work under somebody that as you're charging money for people, they will make sure you don't screw up, and they will make sure the client still gets their money's worth out of things. Or you might need to move. Yeah. People forget that. I mean, seriously, right? Like if you really, like people want to get into movies, right? What do they have to do? They probably have to move.
Yeah.
If you live in fucking Tulsa, whatever, like there's probably not a big movie scene out there and you might need to move.
Yeah.
Sometimes that happens also. If you live in the middle of the country, there's probably not a big demand for dog training out there. Mm-hmm. You might need to move.
Yeah. Birdie said, I think what he's saying is it depends on the dog because what is aversive to one dog may not be the same to another. Same with reinforcement.
That is a true statement. I don't know which one you're referring to, but that is absolutely a true statement that we have to look at individual dogs and what those dogs are motivated by.
Yeah.
Which is why I push back on the I want my dog to really like tug. It's like, I don't know. They might not. They just might not.
Yeah.
Right? Other dogs might really like it. But just because some dogs like tug doesn't mean you can make your dog really like tug.
Yeah. We're all cut up right now.
All right. That's good. That was an hour, I think.
Yeah, over an hour.
So look at that. We're going to end that on that. Guys, this was great. Hold on. Birdie said, in your experience, if you do you think shelters practice force-free garbage and that's why dogs rot in cells? I think this is like almost could be its whole podcast topic. We work with a lot of shelters that employ balance training methods, but the environment of being in the shelter is so not conducive to having a dog with a good state of mind that no matter what training methods you're employing, the dogs are like, they're not going to do great. You know what I mean? It's just not going to happen, right? So I actually don't blame force-free for this. I don't blame balance for this. I don't blame anything for this. Just being in a shelter, you're fighting that uphill battle constantly. Yeah. Like we just talked about, well, could you punish away reactivity if you still let them pull and do this and do that? It's like you're fighting an uphill battle. Maybe you can get it a little bit better, but it's not going to be what you want it to be, right? And same deal with dogs that are in shelters.
Yeah.
All right, guys, I'm ending.
All right.
Catch you on the next one.
Yeah.